Everyone to the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board special meeting. Today is Thursday, June 30th. Time is 5:04 p.m. And we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we have a roll call, please?
Pam Kirby, Kim Hartmann,
George Jackson.
Barbara Lebryk,
And Bonnie Sneed. All members are present, and we have a quorum. First item for our study session is information discussion item 3A. The governing board will discuss bell schedules. Dr. Birdwell.
Thank you, President Sneed, Governing Board. I'm going to kind of take you through our thought process during the research of this. So before I begin, let me just say I want to say thank you to the principals who spent more than one meeting with me during the summertime, as well as last May. And then also thank you to a group of department chairs and SEA reps that spent some time with me as well. And then, of course, thank you to our community for all those lovely emails. Appreciate that as well, because we kind of get a sense of what parents think. So let me just say, at a conclusion of the discussion with these department chairs, the SEA reps, and the principals, and yes, of course, reading a multitude of emails, and in addition, we conducted an analysis of neighboring districts, start times, and credit requirements. Quite honestly, I'm going to start with the end and then explain why. We really believe that the answer to the issue that we're facing is to enroll all seniors in a 5th-hour class or a 0-hour class, equaling the 5 courses, which would be the 720 hours required under the statute. And now, let me explain that to you. But that's the conclusion coming from the educators. Let me start by helping you understand that we had an audit, and the audit occurred, and we got the results in April. So it really was a month before graduation, and all of a sudden we are hearing, hey, there needs to be more minutes in the day, more minutes of instructional time in the day. And that can be done in 2 manners. One, how you use from bell to bell, and then, of course, by putting more minutes in. So we began to go back and research that and make sure that we were accurate with our data. Start off with, the state requires during an ADM that for high school students, grades 9, 10, 11, and 12, have 720 hours of instruction within a 4-period day. It differs by the grade level. So if you have a K-8 school, you have to go by the longest student, and you can see that 7th and 8th graders are 1,000 hours. If you're an AOI, so if you're an online program, it is even more hours that have to be recorded through a computerized instruction. So we began to look at our own group. So last year's graduating class in our seniors, semester 1, broken down by our high schools here, 784 of our seniors were 4 or fewer periods. And in the second semester, 809 of our students were 4 or fewer periods. So, and it is an Arizona thing. So for those of us who haven't been out of the state of Arizona, going a full day of school is not uncommon for all 4 years. But I've been in Arizona now for 31 of my 34 years, and have found it to be an Arizona way of doing business. If a graduate can get enough credits in, let's let them take a half day. And later I'll talk to you about some of the other research that's come out over time that makes us as educators be concerned about this particular issue. So basically we go to the Arizona Department of Education, and they give us a policy and a guideline to how you record your ADM. And when you look at that, there are basically 4 criteria. First, students attend 4 or more courses that count towards graduation. Well, we can assure you that all of our students are taking graduation requirements, whether it be an elective or a core course. The courses must be at least 123 hours of instruction annually to count for the Carnegie unit. That is the credit that goes on the transcript. So if that was shortened, your transcripts would not be valid transcripts. Ours are valid transcripts, and certainly students have 123 hours of instruction. All 4 subjects combined must meet 720 hours, and then students must be in attendance for 180 days each school year, and you cannot go shorter than that. So you have to make sure that you're meeting that as well. So those are the 4 guidelines that we look for when we set up high school bell schedules, as well as middle, as well as looking at our elementary, of course, with fewer hours. So here's what we found. In Arcadia, We were short 73 hours, 73.45 hours of instructional time last year for those seniors who were in 4 periods. In Coronado, for the students who were 4 periods or less, we found that they were short 79.167 hours. And then when we looked at Saguaro, 64.1, Desert Mountain, 57.62, and Chaparral, 51.8. And you can imagine that 50 hours plus instruction is quite a bit of instructional lost time, and certainly wasn't intentional by any means. These things evolve over time. I was asked, well, why does this happen? Well, it happens for a myriad of reasons. It's what happens during the beginning of the bell to the end of the bell. When we go forward, I'm going to talk about some things that typically are high schoolish kinds of pieces. But let's start with option 1. If we were to go with option 1, which was our recommendation of let's put every senior in 5 hours of the day, that would equal the 720 required hours. They could take that 0 hour, they could take that 5th hour. But in addition, we need to make sure there are 180 days of attendance. We need to be careful about how we schedule finals. Sometimes school districts tend to want to do, well, we only have periods 3, 4 today, and tomorrow we'll have 5, 6, and then we have makeup day. You have to have all of those days working together where students are in attendance. So students need to be in attendance for it to count as official 180 days. The use of instructional time bell to bell is critical, so things like dawn time or things like thrives begin to take away the minutes of instruction. So that's an issue for us to consider and talk about. Those don't count. Neither do study halls or teachers' aides or the period between instruction to lunch. The passing periods between periods of instruction to periods of instruction do count as instructional time, and that is the only leniency within that. A student assembly would not count. A character education assembly would not count. So the homecoming assembly doesn't count. Neither does the prom assembly or the SAT assembly or the I think of the myriad of types of issues that we have, the fine arts assemblies. And my goodness, if we win the state championship, we better have an assembly. It would not count. It would deduct from instructional time. So what you try to do is build enough hours within your bell schedule to accommodate for the thing that kids also love. And they do love the arts. They love the sports. So we want to make sure we take in consideration. Accountability for that academic focus is really important when we look at bell schedules. Oftentimes principals will say, or teachers will say to principals, because I certainly heard it when I was a principal, protect the instructional time. Please don't have some kind of announcement, Mr. Smith, will you please come to the office in the middle of my instruction? So we like to protect the instructional time as best as we can. Aligning high school bell schedules is also important when you share staff. So staff have to travel from building to building. When you share programs like distance learning, because that has to be aligned in order for the full instructional time to be used for those students. When you are partners with a JTED, such as EVIT, because their bell schedules don't necessarily align to ours. So when you look at that, you're trying to protect accountability of academic focus. And then there's this thing called the alignment to the AIA bylaws. And if you're an athlete, one of those semesters during your senior year, you have to be enrolled in 5 credits. Now, it's really critical that once you start a class, that we also don't let you drop it 2 months into it. So we tend to get a little bit loose on that sometimes at high school, and we need to make sure that we are holding fast to that process of having those athletes attend those. Here's a little bit longer documentation about the purpose for an aligned bell schedule, but distance learning can be a significant issue. In our district, we have 11 world language courses, and these are critical languages. And they're scheduled to be connected next year at least 2 of our campuses every period of the day. And when you look at that, there must be an alignment for that student to get the full instructional minutes. Right now, our kids on distance learning sometimes miss 10 to 11 minutes of instruction waiting for the sequence of the other bell so that the other students are in class as well. So that's a bit of a problem for us, and we should fix that if we're going to have these conversations. Again, maximum use of instructional time and safety, the consistency of bells are essential for the purpose of offering distance learning. I mentioned traveling teachers. All of that's critically important for us. CTE courses is the EVIT course we're talking about. And then if a student wants to go from one campus to another for a course that's not offered on their campus, this also would be an issue. the fifth block, if we are to say, hey, you need to take a fifth block, students, we ought to look at what does that mean? Well, 92% of the graduates from the Scottsdale Unified School District go to college. So we need to look at that rigor. Academic rigor should be our focus on that. Is the course that they're taking preparing them for either college or career, and is it the rigor that they need? So sometimes I'll hear a parent say, well, my student has taken all of the math courses available. Do we have another level? Well, we need to make sure that AP Statistics and other courses like that make so in an hour that our students can take it, that we don't block AP Statistics in 6 periods so that the seniors can't even have an opportunity to take that course. That's an internal management of your master schedule that all principals work with. We also, and I'm going to go back to math here, but we should encourage every senior to enroll in math, and here's why. We know by talking to ASU and NAU and the U of A that 60% of college freshmen take remedial math. And when they look at that data, what they found out is that the high school senior was not enrolled in math their senior year because they finished their credits, and boy, if I don't have to take math, I'm not gonna take math. Well, the problem is, if you sit out, even though you're a fine math student, you tend to forget, and so you take that placement test, and you end up going back and remediating. So it's really critical for seniors to be enrolled in math. Now, if you're going into a program like pre-med or you're going into engineering, the folks will tell you those students should be in calculus and high-level statistics before they enter college, or they do not match up with the students coming from out of state and foreign students. So our students need to have those high levels of mathematics. We also encouraged a course called CAP, and we thought it was a great option, and I'll talk about it in a few minutes, but it's a career readiness. We have also learned that students today need to have an opportunity to see if I intern in that doctor's office, or I intern in that veterinarian's office, if I intern in that law office, if I have an opportunity to intern in taking care of special needs students, whatever my interest might be, it helps them determine what they will take in college. And many times they will change their mind. We also know, by the way, that college students change their mind at least 7 times while they're in college. But it helps the parent if the student has a better idea so that they're not paying tuition for courses that are not necessarily going to get them where they want to be. Public speaking, personal finance, I can't think of a better class for somebody going off to college than personal finance. And any parent who has a college student knows exactly what I'm saying. But world languages, we know that the colleges require 2 years of language. So to continue to enhance that language development, we know that the global language today is Mandarin. The arts. Why the arts? Because the arts are what we're looking for in the creative and innovative mind. And as we look at the future job, it's going to be titled around innovation. And they're looking for thinkers. The arts help kids become thinkers. So that's just an example of the kinds of conversations our counselors would have with our seniors as they look at a 5th block. I wanted to mention this because I had a lot of parents ask me if I knew anything about research. I would say the one thing about me is before I'm an educator, I'm a researcher. So yes, I am well versed in the teen brain. But I'm also well versed in another piece of research, and it's about engagement in activities, athletics, and the arts. And here's what we need to know, that high school participation in activities, clubs, sports, the arts, kids will have higher grades, expectations, and attainments. We know that they have a greater personal confidence and self-esteem. We know that they have greater connections with school, and that is greater attachment and support from adults. Stronger peer relationships, more academically oriented friends, greater family attachments, more frequent interactions with the parents, more restraint in avoiding risky behaviors. Here's what we know, and let me explain risky behaviors. We know that students who are involved in types of activities and arts and sports tend to not be teen pregnant. They tend not to be involved in drugs, alcohol, and other types of behaviors that would put them at risk. And that's critical in our world today. We also know, and here's an interesting piece, that they also tend to volunteer. And we know that certainly volunteerism is a critical piece of our future. So wonderful research, and I've put the link here for any of our parents to be able to read. And why do I bring that up? Because these 2 pieces of research sometimes conflict. Because we know that kids should sleep a little more in the morning. I'm not going to deny that. I agree. It's hard to get them out of bed, and having a 14-year-old, soon to be 15 in 15 days, they don't like to get out of bed early. I get that. Research says that the brain begins to wake up about 8:45, 9 o'clock. For any teacher who teaches first period, we thank the teen brain. It's a very calm first hour. But here's the other side of that. A few years ago in Scottsdale, they did an analysis of how much school kids were missing. And athletes and kids involved in activities, in robotics, in the arts. We're missing a lot of school 5th and 6th period. So you try to strike a balance. Is it 7:45 the perfect number? I wouldn't say it is or it isn't. I would say you always try to strike a balance between the teen brain and the athletics that you want kids involved with. And you don't want high absenteeism, particularly for freshmen and sophomores. In the same hand, we want them engaged. So you as a governing board always will have the struggle of trying to balance between these two pieces of research. So 7:45 is not a bad time. I'll show you in a minute what your neighbors are doing. Here's the other thing you need to know, that to be a course accepted by the State Department, it has to have these things. It has to be a plan of study developed by teachers. It has to be lesson plans developed by the teacher. You have to have a scope and sequence, a curriculum, learning objectives, a description of how the instructional time links to the student's course of study, completion, or grade level advancement. You have to have proof that the credit was earned for successful completion of the course assessed and actual assessment of the individual student performance against instructional period objectives. If you don't have this criteria, a course is not a course. This is our guideline under the state statute that says in order to count as a course for graduation, a course for the transcript, a course to be counted for ADM, it must meet these qualifications. It also goes on in another statute and talks about brick and mortar. In other words, you have to be in a building taking the course. Well, a career awareness program, we had 235 seniors in May register for this. We anticipated the first way to resolve this was to put kids in 5 blocks. So just to let you know, of all the seniors for next year, I only have 55 not registered for a 5th period class. Chaparral is working on that. However, I do have 235 kids signed up for a course that the state is right now deeming will not count because it doesn't have seat time in brick and mortar. It is an intern at work. And so the seat time is with the employer, and the employer signs off on that. We are going to appeal with the Department of Education to see if this can count, because we value it. In today's, and they started dealing with this here about 10 years ago, but we believe with today's focus on career and college, this is a great course. I realize in the past it maybe didn't have the level of rigor that the State Department would have liked, but I'd sure like to pilot it and give them that rigor, because I do think it is valuable, and I think we can have all those 6 criteria tied to it. In order to do this, as we got students signed up and as the counselors talked to kids, the principals met with me, and we assigned out approximately 2.0 FTE across the 5 schools to make sure we had enough teachers to teach this course and the other courses that seniors would enroll in. So that is already in our budget and has already been staffed. So putting the other 55 students in is not going to require any more staffing, and there's no additional costs. It's already in our budget. Career awareness, this is just how it breaks down into what schools, just to let you know, semester 1 and semester 2. A very large appeal in Chaparral. So here's option 2. I didn't want to leave off anything, so let me just talk about when we started putting seniors into the 5th block. Yeah, I heard from parents then too. Not as many emails though. Matter of fact, I think I got 1 email, but the rest were phone calls that Dr. Von Uchten and myself took. We called people back, had conversations with them. And they, of course, were concerned for their senior. And at that point, it was a senior issue. We believe that if we do the 5th block, we will have exceptions. And basically, there are 3 exceptions. Exception is, if you can fill out this form and bring me your college transcript that shows that you're enrolled in a college course, I certainly do not want to prevent you from enrichment and moving forward. If you have a hardship, there is a financial hardship, and you have a job, and you've been working that, and you're helping support your family, certainly we should have an exception if you're on track to graduate. And then the third reason might be a medical hardship case where I take care of a medically fragile individual and I need to be home at certain times. I don't like policies that don't have exceptions because life is not that clean. So we're going to be providing the principals a forum, an opportunity that if the board says yes, go forward with that 5th block, we want to be able to make some exceptions. We realize we won't be funded for those students, and that's fine. If they're on track to graduate, that's the first priority. So we did look at bell schedules. I wanted to explain it to you so you understand the complexities of it. Here's a 58-minute bell schedule. Basically, what you look at is the first 4 periods, and that's 58 times 4 is 232 minutes. There are 3 passing periods that get to count. If they're 6-minute passing periods, it's 18. You get a total of 250 minutes. You take 250 minutes and you times 180 days, 45,000 minutes of school. The kids would love this. They'll probably say, in 12 years, I put in how many minutes? And then the minutes then are divided back by 60 to create the hours. And of course, at 750 hours, well, you say, but the state statute only requires 720. In the next column is what's called that high school culture. Hey, in Scottsdale, on the first day, we have an assembly schedule so that we welcome those new freshmen and we welcome the students back. Then we have 7 early release days throughout the entire year. That is 14 hours of professional development. We then have 4 hours of student assemblies. And you might have a few more if you have a state championship, Saguaro. 2 hours of late start. That's the PSAT. That's when we're giving the PSAT and some of those college entrance assessments, and we're focusing on certain students. Then we have 6 hours of days that we change the schedule of the day to address finals and getting through the first semester and second semester. Then we have 14 hours of adjustment during the Arizona merit, the state assessment. And this past year, our principals went to a block schedule. And so teachers got a flavoring of what it was like to begin the block schedule. And yes, I did get calls on that too, and emails. So that was an interesting conversation. But a good experience for some teachers to have. Basically, that's 40 hours of outside of instruction that totals. You only have 30 available in a 58-minute schedule. So you're already 10 hours short of what you're going to do to address that issue. You switch that to a 56-minute bell. 7-minute passing, because one of the questions was, in Desert Mountain, can I get from point A to point B in 6 minutes or 5 minutes or 7 minutes? So we wanted to run a different scenario. In this case, you only have an extra 15 hours to address those items up above. 54-minute. 54 is a pretty common bell schedule. You only have 2 extra hours in the entire year to spend on one of those school culture pieces. And that's a critical problem. Currently, we have 53 minutes. And in 53 minutes, we are short 10 hours from making that work. So that's part of the reason that we're short 50 hours at the end of the year. And then you throw Dawn Time or Thrive or any of these culture issues on top of that, and that's how you got the 50 hours short in one school and the 60 hours short in another school. This is our typical bell schedule right now, 53 minutes with a 6-minute passing. Now, it's not the same at every school because every school had a separate bell schedule. But that's pretty much the issue that we faced. High school culture, is it important? Is it not important? I think it's extremely important. I think we ought to celebrate when the band gets a superior rating. I think we ought to celebrate when the football team wins a state championship or the basketball team or the tennis girls. I think we ought to have things like SAD programs, safety during prom time. I think that we ought to talk about those pieces that are the unwritten curriculum. Unfortunately, the state does not count the unwritten curriculum as instructional time. So I am a big supporter of this high school culture. But I do think we ought to look at lunch times. I think we ought to look at distance learning. So that is not necessarily a board issue. That will be a high school principal's issue to say, we need some continuity and consistency for the better teaching of all children. And that'll be a conversation that would occur with all the principals and Dr. Van Echten to discuss. We can make this fit in our 7:45 time frame. However, that said, students need to be enrolled in 5 classes. And we still think it's in their best interest academically if we're going to raise academic expectations. We didn't stop there. We looked at what the neighbors are doing. I don't want you to think that we think we have every answer. You can see that Shadow Mountains has a 56-minute period. And I showed you what a 56-minute period gives you. By the way, they have 22 credits for graduation. They start at 7:30 in the morning. Mesa High School is going 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock, 56-minute periods. Chandler High School's 7:25 to 2:14, 56-minute periods. PV Horizon High School, 7:30 to 2:10. Gilbert High School, 7:30, 2:30. Deer Valley High School, 7:30, 2:12 is their new schedule because they got the ADE audit last year, and maybe I'll take a moment to explain that after the bell schedule. BASIS, if you're in BASIS, our new competition, if you're going to take electives, which by the way, to graduate from high school, you got to have some electives, you start at 7:30 in the morning. Your core courses start at 8:15. Now that's a master scheduling issue. So that's something we can talk about through the year with principals about how many elective classes are first period versus core courses getting shifted to periods 2, 3, 4. And then Great Hearts, all we could find is the 8, and there's I don't know the answer to why they get 21 credits. Its state statute requires 22. I don't know that I understand that. That would be something for the newspaper to figure out. But even BASIS has an early grad at 21. I don't understand that because the state statute says to earn a diploma in Arizona, you must have 22. You got that right? Yeah. All right, good. So that's just a little research. It comes from website research, but we certainly want to consider those things. It's not that we didn't look at some of the private schools, because we certainly took a look at Notre Dame, we took a look at Xavier and Brophy and how many credits they all require, but that would be another time. Let me talk about audits for a minute. I want to be brief about this, but when you get audited, and ours is an external audit under Heinfeld-Meach, audits are important. Audits are to prevent you from making mistakes. So if they discover that there's a practice that's been going on that maybe needs to be corrected, your hired external auditor helps you correct those. So we're in the process of that. They know that the ADE is focusing on high school minutes of the day. So when they came in and audited, they focused on our high school minutes to see if we needed to make an adjustment. They gave us that finding so that we could figure that out. So when that audit comes out, it will be a finding for us. What the finding will then say is that Scottsdale Unified School District has already corrected, because we'll correct this going into next year. At some point next spring, ADE will audit us, and they will then declare an audit. Depending on when they declare the audit, depending on when the audit begins, there is a typical 3-year look. So if they declare next spring that they're going to audit us, they will audit us for the 17-18 school year and go back to 17-18, 16-17, and 15-16. And then we will have to deal with what you saw earlier in the slide, that there is a financial concern based on last year's graduating seniors. And we will then put together a response. And we'll see how good I really am at this. But I do believe we have some good conversations to have. What's critical is when you find there's an error, you don't turn a cheek to it. You fix it, that's all. It doesn't mean that there's no blame or no shame. Everybody makes errors over time because this high school thing evolves. We get excited about interventions and we put them in without realizing that there are about 8 laws that have to be reviewed before you can just put an intervention in. So it's all good intention creates a bit of a problem, and then you just fix it, and that's what we're doing. There are also other miscellaneous factors that we ought to talk about at some point. So I want you to know I didn't ignore these things. Early dismissal for staff members. I think it is important. I think when you start talking about accountability for learning, it starts with training your staff appropriately. So I don't think that your PD, I keep saying our PD in Scottsdale is misguided. There are 7 days. It's not exorbitant, and I did an analysis of what other districts are doing. We do not have an excessive amount of PD. If we did, I would tell you we did, but 7 days is not excessive. It also is about creating an environment of retention, and I'm talking about teacher retention. When you look at the studies behind employee retention, the first thing you look at is, are our salaries in a market analysis comparable? Once that issue is addressed, you put it aside and you look at what are the next correlates that cause your employees to want to be part of your organization. They look at environment, how I'm treated, and is there professional opportunities and training for me? So we do that. We don't overdo it. We have 7 days. In an ideal world, we would do more, but the reality is our first priority is having teachers who are highly qualified in front of children. There's research on teacher PD and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Sometimes, and I heard from a teacher when we were meeting with him, hey, I'm not against PD, but please give me something that's worthwhile. And I heard that loud and clear, and trust me, going forward, we'll make sure that what you get is exactly spot on what you should be learning. And we talked about how critical formative assessment was for our secondary folks. Embedded professional development, you heard from Dr. Nance earlier this year say, it's so important to have embedded professional development. So when we get that assessment back and we have that data and it's new, that we're teaching teachers how to use the data to adjust instruction appropriately, and it's in a timely fashion. And then the last issue that I wanted to bring up was the TEA. So for the parents, this is our agreement with our Teachers Association. And in respect to teachers, we should always look at it, although it shouldn't drive the decision and it never should supersede the law. 395 minutes is cutting it doggone close to meet the state statute. And we need to be conscientious of that. I assure you, however, that the bell schedule currently in place at the high school does not break the TEA. We are on target, and everybody has at least a 35-minute duty-free lunch, so we are not in breach of the TEA at all. But I wanted to make sure I covered that and respected what we do with our teachers. There are some legal codes that we had to read to get there. Didn't want you to think we didn't do that either. So there are interacting, overlapping types of code. Now, I would take any question from the board. If there's something I haven't covered, I'm happy to do so. I couldn't capture all the research in a slide presentation, but I am confident in the decision that we've made and hope that the board will stand behind that. We are well on the way of having seniors registered in fifth hour. I'm not going to say that 100% of our parents will be happy with that, but we are creating some exceptions, and the parent that I met with fit right in those exceptions. That student was already enrolled in a college class. I by no means want to cost that dad the tuition he's already paid. His daughter ought to be able to do that. So I'll take any questions the board might have.
Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you, Dr. Birdwell. First question is, will this presentation be posted publicly? Because that was an excellent presentation. It covered all of the major
Absolutely.
points. Okay, so a couple of points of just a little more discussion. You touched on looking at the classes that are offered in that fifth block.
Yes.
So not for next year necessarily, because our high school planning guide's pretty set. And we did add the 4 additional courses at our last meeting with public speaking, et cetera. But can we, before the next high school planning guide is released, take a really good look at the rigor that the district is offering in the afternoon for those students who may want to take a 5th or 6th period class? Because I did get some of that feedback that many families perceive they have to go to an SCC to get the level of rigor they're looking for. And it would be great if we could just have a conversation. Is that something we would like to explore for ourselves? That's a comment, not really a question. On the exceptions, understood for next year, what is will this be open to discussion as well in the fall for the following year around particularly the exceptions with college courses? And are these exceptions we're going to continue to allow in perpetuity, or are we going to try to narrow these exceptions down even further?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that we ought to, in the fall, do a couple studies. I think we ought to talk about graduation credits and really take a look at that and what that means. I think we need to study that. I also think we need to talk about the rigor of high school and study, are we offering all of the rigor that is necessary for those high-end students to really be challenged? Most of the times what I've discovered that there are 2 types of students who take a college class. One who is trying to get ahead, and one who cannot find courses inside my school that challenge me. And so we ought to look at, are we offering for seniors and quite honestly juniors the rigor necessary to challenge them for the next steps of their life? Because let's be honest, it's free here. Mm-hmm. But parents are going to have to pay for it when they leave. So I would like to make sure that we have the rigor. So it'd be a great conversation, a great work study to take a look at that. I definitely think that one of the greatest complaints that we get about high school is it's not rigorous enough.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question. It's around communication. So I understand, I saw the letter that the seniors received back in May from Dr. Von Echten. So the seniors have had the appropriate communication, but you also mentioned Arcadia Thrives and Coronado Dawn in that time, which I know I'm more familiar with Arcadia Thrives, have an early release day. Has that communication, probably not because we haven't voted yet, but when are we going to say, assuming we move forward with the 5th period, when are we going to communicate to those entire communities?
Yeah. In preparation for the governing board's decision this evening, we've actually written a letter, quite honestly, given the numerous emails that we've received. We want to get a letter out right away explaining the 5th hour and having that conversation and getting it out there to the parents. So we will be sending something out immediately following. So they'll have wonderful dialogue over the 4th of July with their children about the 5th block. So that is forthcoming. And then the 55 kids who aren't enrolled, those individuals will be called in towards the end of July before school starts to see the counselor to get them enrolled in an appropriate course. Remember that the majority of the seniors are enrolled in a course. So what we want to communicate to is the underclassmen parents to say the bell schedule is not changing, and we're addressing the senior issue through the seniors and not the rest of the students. But it'll be on the website, it'll be sent out to parents, it'll be emailed out to the staff. Now, the internal issues changes like the dawns and the thrives, that will be included and then communicated through the principal to the teachers, that the tutoring program, they need to get together as teachers and discuss so that they can share with students, hey, if you've been used to using the thrive period to make up the tasks or to get the extra help from the teacher, what is our plan internally to make sure we're still meeting the needs of students who need extra tutoring and assistance with classes? So that would be done by the principal and their teachers.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, because this has been a while since we've heard thrives, and it may have evolved since we last talked about it, but don't some students, aren't they allowed to leave campus
Yes.
early?
Indeed.
So they're now, whether they're freshmen or sophomores or juniors, the whole school's going to have to stay bell to bell.
Yes,
right?
and they should be staying because they're not meeting the instructional minutes of the school year.
Okay, so there will need to be some communication beyond the seniors
Correct.
for those two campuses, that they were now going to be required to stay.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the governing board will be able to, when we talk in the fall and we look at the handbook for next year, make a determination about, what if you have a junior who's on track to graduate? Would it be feasible to say that the junior could go 5 periods and have 1 hour release to go take a college class or something else? I always hope that we provide the best opportunity for kids, but I also know that sometimes there are students who have other issues. So that'll be a conversation for the board when the handbook comes around. Because with the seniors taking 5 periods, this board could decide that juniors and seniors could have a 1-period release time, and therefore earn the right to that if you're on track to graduate and you've done well in your high school career.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Dr. Birdwell. I just wanted to thank you for your clarity in describing the challenge ahead of us and your open-mindedness in allowing the solution to evolve with input from not only the board, but most importantly, the teachers who are the education professionals, and as well the families who are our customers. So thank you.
You're welcome. Good?
Mrs. Hartmann?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Birdwell. That was really a thorough presentation. I know a lot of work went behind that with your team. I have a comment, but a question first, just because I'm not as familiar with the Thrive program and the Coronado Dons. Is that considered, so we need to get those two curriculums on campus. Will they be considered instructional time, or do we need to replace those classes, if they are, or however we refer to it, with another block of classes?
Under the statute, they're defined as study hall.
Okay.
In other words, that it doesn't have the scope and sequence, it doesn't have the curriculum, it's not written by a teacher, there's no grade received, so those 6 criteria that I showed you. So it's really considered study hall, or remediation time, or assistance. So it is not instructional time. So it would not be something that I would recommend going forward at this time. I think what we ought to look at is getting every minute possible into the instructional time of teachers, and then teachers build in appropriate support of students during that instructional time, where students are on the independent time of the work and the teacher is checking individually with students to assist them. So by putting those minutes back into instruction, teachers actually can identify the student who needs that help right there when they're in their class.
Sure. Okay. And so will those two schools, then, will we need to reach out to those students and parents, and will they have to register for another course between now and when this year starts?
Thank you for asking that question, and the answer is no, because the students aren't enrolled in it.
Yeah.
It's we stop teaching at this time frame, and students get to go where they want for assistance. And so no, absolutely no registration is necessary. It's explaining to them that there will not be that opportunity to go get extra help, that the time to get extra help will be before school, at lunch, during class, or after school. which is just a standard practice. And that's what they're used to all the other days of the week. They only have, I believe, Thrive 1 day a week.
Okay.
So the kids are accustomed to that. They've just been using the Thrive period to make up a quiz, make up a test, turn in a late assignment, get a little help.
Okay.
So, and I want to commend the teachers for the work that they have done on that. But there are a lot of kids who go home during that time too.
Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to share with you, speaking from being a chaperone parent at one time, I think there will be, obviously there's no answer that will make everybody happy, but I did have to debate with a son to say, no, you have to take a 5th-hour class, and so you are doing, I think, many chaperone parents a favor by making it a requirement. I'm sure there will be the issues, but overall I think it's will be received well. In a year from now, it'll be moot. Last comment, first of all, I just really want to underscore all the work that went into this. You looked at it from every angle, your team did. It was very thorough, appreciate that. The primary focus, and I know it always is, there's many variables, but it is academic rigor and student achievement. And so this was very much an input, if you will, view, and it was required because that's what the audit's about, number of, credits going in. But I'm always interested in the outputs, which is the quality of the education that's coming out on the other side. And the 92% graduation rate, 90% college attainment rate speaks a lot to that. However, as we go back and we kind of look at this in retrospect, it will be interesting to understand what our student achievement looks like and to build the case of why this does make sense, because there is a correlation between inputs and outputs. But how do we identify that and communicate that clearly to not only, our SUSD community, but really look at it from a broader perspective and be able to share those outcomes. So thank you.
Thank you. By the way, I just want to say that we did hear from some parents who said, I'd be really thankful if the district made this decision for me on the 5 periods. So there are parents who feel the same way about that.
Mrs. Perleberg.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Bertholf, for the presentation. And I too just want to underscore how happy I was to hear that this week you were able to meet with our department chairs, our teacher leaders, all of our principals over the last few weeks. We all received the input from our community with all the emails, and I know that's been incorporated in these discussions. And I don't see how this decision process, could have been done any better. I think it's wonderful. I think we've heard our stakeholders very well regarding the time change, but I also think we've been working hard to communicate that a problem was identified, an issue was identified. We didn't really have a choice in when that happened, and no, we all recognize that this wasn't an ideal time to have these discussions, but here we are doing the best we can. And I'm at this point, especially after this presentation, I believe while we have a issue that's more on the financial end, I think we're making our decision based on what's best for our student achievement. We have the right focus in how we're fixing this issue. And so I'm just, I know that we're all very reassured by that and how we got here tonight. So one quick question, the career awareness program outline that you had on the slide, I assume, so that's obviously was one choice our seniors had.
Oh, yes.
Out of many, obviously. So I guess first, I just kind of wanted to question the anomaly of Coronado having 0, and I didn't know if there was a specific reason why that school, if credit recovery possibly fits more into that school, or there were just other options that fit better for that campus. And also, I did wonder about the world languages. What kind of an increase in classes? The students maybe decide, okay, I've done Spanish 1 and 2, now I guess I'll do 3. I kind of wondered how popular that choice was for our students, kind of getting this thrown at them.
Yeah, Presidency Governing Board I'm not sure that I know the answer on the other piece, but I certainly will look it up, because the other thing I think what I'd like to do is track how the seniors do in their 5th class this year. So from an accountability standpoint, I'm going to self-audit that and follow the students and see how well they do with those courses, because it's important for us to know that they took something that mattered to them and that they did well in it. So a lot of times seniors don't understand that colleges still look at your senior grades. I've been accepted as a junior. They get into their senior year, and they get this thing called senioritis, and they think that those classes and those grades don't matter. But I know colleges that have looked at seniors, particularly large scholarship seniors, and they look both the fall, and they'll take a look at the spring, and if that senior reduced or did poorly, they will pull those scholarships. So it's going to be really important for counselors to counsel students. We in education have been in it so long, and being that I spent half my career in the high school, I've seen students lose scholarships because of that lack of focus. So we'll take a look at what courses they enrolled in. We'll also audit how well they did in those courses and make sure that the counselors are having good conversations with them about the importance of that GPA all the way through the senior year, and that you don't quit midway through the senior year, because the colleges will still look at those grades, even though you've been accepted. There's little caveats in the little small print that talks about how you lose your scholarship. So important to monitor that. I too am wondering how many world languages. I will tell you my experience when seniors have been asked to take more courses, what they take. When I moved to the block schedule in Paradise Valley as a principal, we had more students take more math and more science than we had expected, which was a great thing to see. Again, college-bound students wanting to get that next science in before they hit college. Now, that was before the state upped the requirements of math and science for the entire state. So it will be interesting when our students are presented with another opportunity, what will they focus on? I think the career awareness became an interest because students are trying to determine where they're going to go in their life. And an internship, and we have so many great businesses here in Scottsdale where our kids can go have an internship and really determine, is this my goal and my focus? So we'll monitor this, we'll take a look. Meanwhile, here in July, we will be at the State Department finding out appeal processes. Can we get this to count? Can we be the state pilot for it? Whatever it will take. If not, we will call these students back in and let them know they need to enroll in a different course. But we're really optimistic about the appeal because we really think it has a lot of validity. Over the last 8 years, there's been a focus on college and career readiness as pillars of our state. This ties right to that career piece of preparing for work and knowing, even though I know I have to go off to college to really move forward in my career, am I headed down the right path of study? And that's what we're trying to help these seniors decide.
Thank you.
Ms. Hartmann, did you? I do. Okay.
Just two quick comments on, sorry, I didn't ask this the first time, but when you were talking about the cap, I don't think I heard you mention appeal, and I think we were going to go through the appeal process on that, which I think is excellent, because I do think we could actually be providing a pathway for other school districts in the state. Is that a true
That is
statement?
exactly right. And we really think that it can have the rigor here in Scottsdale that the state is looking for, and really be a model for the rest of the state.
Perfect. And then the other thing I was wondering, this is another topic that I'm kind of passionate about, but it's the data that we've been working on with Arizona State in terms of college attainment as well as college graduation rates by high school. And I'm wondering if we could take some time, just like you have kind of indicated, looking at the success of the 5th hour and just overall kind of link. I know there's not a one-to-one link to this, but really take a hard look at college attainment by our schools, and Coronado being specifically one of them that has less college attainment, and really start to really look at that and figure out, reverse engineer it, if you will, right? If we've got 20 kids going there, what will it take to get 40 kids? What will it take to get 80 kids there? And really reverse engineer it and see if there is a relationship to this academic rigor, as well as the exceptions. How do we work through this so that every child can be successful? But the real comment and wondering question is, do you think we can use some of that ASU university data to help inform us if we're doing the right things in the best interest of our students from that perspective.
Again, Governing Board President Sneed, I appreciate that you bring that up, Mrs. Hartmann, and let me say it from maybe a different perspective. The best measure that a K-12 system has of itself is the success of its graduates. So one of the measures that we would like to look at is our partnership with ASU is to go back and have conversations with our graduates who are now in the rigor of college and have the conversation about what were the correlates in high school that helped you be successful here. We know you're being successful in college, but what were the courses that helped prepare you so that that's data and information we can share back with our parents and our current students. We can learn a lot from our graduates about what we're doing right. And trust me, they're willing to share what we're doing wrong. And that we want to hear too. Years ago when I was at the neighboring district in Paradise Valley, we used to invite our graduates back to talk to our students. And it was enlightening to hear them talk about the courses that truly prepared them for college. And they were always the high rigor course of the teacher that was a little bit demanding that I felt was really tough in high school. And they were thanking them because then college was easier in some respect because they had had that preparation. A good example of that is when a student is in an AP course or an IB course, and the high rigor that they're put under really prepares them for the rigor when they hit college. And it sets them up for life too, but when you take that next step, it can be really a bit of a shock for a high school student who went 11 and a half years versus 12. And I stole that from Mrs. Sneed in our conversation earlier this week. But it is critical. And you will find that students who are in AP and students who are in IB programs typically don't want to take a half day. Sometimes when they take it, it's because my friends really encourage me to, but most of the time, they understand that that rigor is necessary for the next choice that they're making, and if they're going to compete with kids from other states for placement, particularly when you start talking about if you're going to go to a Harvard or a Georgetown, or you're going to go to UC Berkeley, if you're going to go to any one of the top Stanford top universities, and quite honestly, ASU Byrd College, our graduates need to have high rigor or they will not succeed. And so I think that backwards conversation, if you want to call it a backward design, is the appropriate conversation we ought to be having. We know we've done well when we look at how well our graduates do. And the fact that the top students in the freshman class at ASU are graduates of Scottsdale tells us something. But we ought to get the detail of that. Exactly what course really helped you prepare. So reaching out to our graduates, I think, is a great conversation this year, and I look forward to that, and certainly will assign that.
I wanted to thank you very much for engaging all of the stakeholders in this decision. And I remember having those conversations with my daughter when we moved her from Ohio, and she said, but I can get out halfway through the day. And it's like, no, you're in K-12, not K-11 and a half. And with that, she decided not to take math. And she was one of those people that had the surprise of her life when she went to college. Even though she'd been a great math student, she went to college and she couldn't pass the beginning class. And so she couldn't pass the test to get into a class that counted. So right off the bat, she felt that failure. And it wasn't just the fact that it cost the parents money, and I think it surprises a lot of parents when their kids go off to school and they find out, well, what do you mean they can't pass this math test? But it's not just the money, it's the starting off right off the bat with a failure. And I think it discourages a lot of kids. So I agree with the math in the senior year especially. I think too, when the state added a math requirement and a science requirement, it hurt a lot of our fine arts programs because there just wasn't room in the schedule in order to do all of that and still get out halfway through your 12th grade year. And so I think that this will help bolster some of our fine arts and maybe computer classes or business classes or some of the electives that we have, and we'll help them make, quite frankly, so that, because we'll have the numbers. One of the questions that I did have is we had talked about a 9th grade reading remediation class, classes for Coronado, I know. How will that count? I mean, will that count as instructional time?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, President Steed, for asking that question. When you add a course, whether it be a CAP course or a reading course or anytime, as long as it fits those 6 criteria, it can count. It just may not count in a particular subject. It may not count as one of the 4 English cores, but it can count as an elective. And therefore, it could count towards graduation, because remember, you need 8 electives to graduate. So you have a chance at 24, you need 22 to graduate, not much room for error. So when you start taking those flexibilities, a course like reading that is so critical would be an elective course.
Okay, and it won't be considered remediation it won't be considered a study hall?
No,
It will
absolutely
count as seat time. Okay, great. So can you go back to the slide that is telling us what your recommendation is?
Right out of the chute. So we're really recommending that you enroll all seniors, that we enroll all seniors in a 5th-hour class or 0-hour class equaling the 5 courses necessary to meet the 720 hours, therefore fixing the audit finding. And that's really what we would like to do. We started that process back in May, but we also heard from senior parents, so we thought we should explore the bell schedule. We certainly didn't mean to upset the underclassmen parents, so my apologies for that. But I always want to take every avenue that a parent questions me on and make sure that I thoroughly understand it. So we did a much broader investigation. It wasn't our intent to certainly upset the apple cart, but evidently we got a lot of steam behind us. So.
Okay.
But I do appreciate the time to study it and to look at it, and I feel like, and personally from this superintendent's perspective, I've enjoyed the time with the teachers and the principals, and I have to say that, is Brian here? Brian Parks is amazing. So he did just a phenomenal job with data and bearing with the questions I kept firing at him. Well, what about this? What about this? Can you check this? Can you research this? And then sat in all those meetings with us. So Brian, a yeoman's job. You did a fabulous job, and thank you for that. So it was a great opportunity for us as a team. So President Steed, this is our recommendation. We don't recommend at all that you touch the bell schedule. We can do it in the time frame that you give us. We recommend that we just keep enrolling the seniors in 5th hour and deal with case by case any hardship that we might have or any student that has done an enrichment, and continue to encourage them to do so.
Thank you. And this is a study session, so there is not a vote scheduled, but with all of the conversation that we've had, would the board be comfortable if we remove it from our next agenda so that if people would like to go home, they can go home?
Yeah, so Governing Board, the best way to handle this is that when you get to your next agenda, no motion, it dies for lack of interest, and therefore there would be no bell schedule change, and that would be our recommendation from administration if you would have no motion this evening.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0.